The modern world is characterized by an acute sense of spiritual fragmentation. We search for meaning in careers, in relationships, in possessions, but rarely do we find that profound, unshakable sense of inner completeness. We struggle with the fear of oblivion, the gnawing anxiety of existential dread, and the chaotic nature of the subconscious mind. We dedicate years, sometimes decades, to therapy, self-help, and intellectual pursuits, striving toward a single elusive goal: inner peace, wholeness, and the complete reconciliation with the self. Now imagine a time and a place where this profound psychological transformation was not a lifelong, uncertain quest, but a guaranteed outcome of a meticulously choreographed, sacred ritual. Imagine an ancient mystery school that promised to cure its initiates of the fear of death, a fear that fundamentally dictates most of our choices from the moment we are born until the moment we depart. That place was Eleusis. For nearly 2,000 years, an astonishing span of human history stretching from the Mycenaean civilization right into the heart of the Roman Empire, the most influential minds of the Western world undertook a pilgrimage to this humble town outside Athens. Plato, Cicero, Sophocles, and Marcus Aurelius, all were initiated. They endured hardship, ritual cleansing, fasting, and a grueling 9-day ceremonial process, all under a vow of absolute, unbreakable secrecy regarding what they experienced in the great hall of initiation, the Telesterion. The only thing we know with certainty is the effect it had on them. The Roman orator Cicero, a man of immense logic and skepticism, remarked that the mysteries taught the initiates not only to live happily, but also to die with a better hope. The transformation was so absolute, so complete, that the initiates gained an entirely new perspective on life and, critically, on death. The question that haunts every modern psychologist, philosopher, and historian is this: what was the secret mechanism of this transformation? What precisely did they see, do, or ingest that could produce such a profound, immediate, and lasting psychological effect? This is the ultimate missing link between ancient wisdom and modern understanding of the psyche. This is where the revolutionary insights of Carl Gustav Jung become our essential tool. Jung, the father of analytical psychology, understood that the human psyche is not a blank slate, but a repository of inherited wisdom, the collective unconscious. He saw that the myths, rituals, and symbols of antiquity were not superstitious fairy tales, but the living language of this deeper mind. Jung knew that the Eleusinian Mysteries were the perfect ancient distillation of the process of individuation, his central concept for psychological wholeness. Individuation is the difficult, often painful path where an individual integrates the warring elements of their own psyche, the conscious ego, the shadow, the anima, animus, and ultimately unites them under the umbrella of the self, the holistic core of the personality. The journey to Eleusis was, in Jung's view, a perfectly engineered, ritualized descent into the collective unconscious, designed to force the initiate to confront and integrate the deepest psychological realities in a safe, ceremonial setting. It was psychology practiced as profound, transformational theater. Think about the sheer impossibility of the achievement. An initiatory process that took 9 days to guarantee spiritual and psychological peace that modern man spends his entire life chasing. The success of Eleusis depended on a profound understanding of the human soul, an understanding that was subsequently lost, marginalized, or intentionally suppressed by the later dogmatic institutions that arose. In this deep investigation, using the architecture of Jungian thought, we will finally decrypt the structure of the Eleusinian rites. We will see how the entire 9-day process was a direct ritualistic enactment of the individuation process, designed not for worship, but for cognitive rebirth. We will examine the profound archetypal drama of Demeter and her daughter Persephone, which is the emotional and psychological foundation of the entire ritual. This myth perfectly maps the descent into the unconscious and the terrifying process of confronting the unknown. Wonadun, the function of the mysterious sacred potion, the Kykeon, and how this simple-sounding drink may have served as the chemical key to unlock the doors of perception, temporarily bypassing the ego and allowing direct entry into the collective. Unconscious, a powerful, controlled spiritual experience that Jung only ever theorized about. The final unspeakable vision, the Epopteia, that cured the fear of death, and how this vision relates to Jung's concept of the integrated self and the experience of synchronicity. This is not a history lesson. This is an attempt to recover the ancient fast-track wisdom of psychological wholeness. By understanding the Eleusinian Mysteries through the lens of Carl Jung, you are recovering the oldest and most effective roadmap to your own true destiny. Your own personal journey toward the self is reflected in the path taken by millions of seekers in Eleusis 2,000 years ago. Stay with us, because the secret to living happily and dying with better hope is about to be revealed. The ancient wisdom of Eleusis is ready to speak to your modern mind. The entire 9-day journey of the Eleusinian Mysteries was anchored by a single, tragic, and ultimately triumphant myth. The story of the goddess Demeter, her daughter Persephone, and the dark ruler of the underworld, Hades. To the rational mind, this is a beautiful yet sorrowful tale of seasons and cyclical agriculture. To Carl Jung, however, this myth was a precise, symbolic blueprint of the human soul's greatest psychological challenge: the confrontation with the shadow and the inevitable process of death and rebirth. Jung taught us that archetypes are primordial, inherited patterns of thought and behavior that reside within the collective unconscious. They are not concepts. They are forces that shape our experience. The drama of Eleusis was so effective precisely because it forced the initiates to live through the most fundamental and potent archetypes known to man. Let us dissect this sacred myth through the lens of analytical psychology. Demeter is the goddess of the harvest, fertility, and the nurturing earth. In the context of the Eleusinian initiation, she represents the stable, conscious world of the ego and the everyday, functional reality of the initiate. She is the familiar ground, the source of nourishment and security. The initiate, at the beginning of the process, identifies almost entirely with this secure, Demeter-like existence, a life governed by order, sunlight, and predictable cycles. When Persephone is abducted, Demeter is plunged into inconsolable grief, bringing famine and desolation to the world. Psychologically, this represents the sudden, traumatic disruption of the conscious ego. This disruption is essential for growth. The secure, predictable life must be shattered for the deeper self to emerge. The chaos and fasting that began the 9-day ritual, the ascesis, were the initiate's symbolic enactment of Demeter's despair, forcing them out of the comfort zone of the ego. Persephone, the beautiful maiden, represents the part of the psyche that is still unconscious, untouched, and full of unactualized potential. Jungians would see her as the anima, the feminine aspect in a man's psyche, or the unintegrated inner maiden in a woman's. She is the delicate, intuitive part of the soul, easily susceptible to being seized by the powers of the deep, unknown mind. Her sudden abduction by Hades, the ruler of the underworld, is the central psychological event. This is not a moral kidnapping. It is the soul's violent descent into the unconscious. The underworld for Jung is the terrain of the shadow and the repository of all repressed, dark, and powerful psychological material. Every initiate, in order to achieve wholeness, must symbolically or literally descend into this realm to retrieve their lost Persephone, their lost self. The ritual forced the initiate to symbolically experience this seizure. By undergoing the strict periods of fasting, confusion, and ritual humiliation, the initiate's everyday ego was weakened, allowing the powerful symbolic narrative of Persephone's descent to take hold of their inner life. They were becoming Persephone, dragged screaming into the depths of their own hidden mind. Hades, the unseen ruler, is the perfect manifestation of the Jungian shadow. The shadow is not merely evil. It is everything we consciously repress. Our rejected desires, our unacknowledged weaknesses, our creative impulses that were deemed socially unacceptable, and most importantly, our fear of mortality. The underworld is the place of death, darkness, and decay. The ultimate reality the ego desperately tries to avoid. The purpose of the Eleusinian descent was to integrate the shadow, not to destroy it. In the myth, Persephone must spend a portion of the year in the underworld, becoming queen of the dead. This means the initiate must realize that their true self is not solely light, Demeter's world, but must contain the darkness, Hades' world. Wholeness is the marriage of the conscious and the unconscious, the living and the dead. The fear of death, the ultimate fear of the shadow, was cured because the initiate, like Persephone, became a sovereign ruler within the realm of death. They integrated it. The 9-day pilgrimage, the long walk, the chaotic chanting, and the final moments in the darkness of the Telesterion were all designed to create a liminal, highly suggestible state where the conscious ego could surrender to the dark, purifying forces of the underworld and emerge integrated. The triumphant return of Persephone to the light is the final essential stage of the ritual. She returns not as the naive maiden, but as Kor, the integrated goddess who reigns over both light and darkness. Psychologically, this represents the union of opposites, the hallmark of the integrated self. The initiate, who went down as a fragmented person, governed by the limited ego, emerges as a whole being. They now carry the wisdom of the underworld, the shadow's knowledge, back into the world of the living, the ego's reality. This integration is the source of the promised better hope in death. If you have consciously faced and integrated your own death, your own shadow, there is nothing left to fear. You know that even in the ultimate darkness, a part of you remains sovereign. Jung found this mythical structure of descent and reemergence so vital that he used it to interpret his patient's dreams and to chart his own terrifying journey through the Red Book. The Eleusinian Mysteries provided him with a historical, cultural validation for the intense, often chaotic, internal psychological process required for individuation. The priests of Eleusis did not preach abstract doctrines. They constructed a psychodrama. They guided the initiates through a carefully controlled, staged psychological crisis that mimicked the soul's own internal battle for wholeness. The entire process served to shock the ego out of its complacency and force a direct, primal encounter with the great archetypes of life and death, consciousness and the unconscious. But the myth of the descent was only preparation. The most profound part of the ritual was yet to come. The moment when the symbolic narrative ended and the initiate was given the chemical key to unlock the collective unconscious itself. This was the role of the sacred potion, the Kykeon. In our next block, we will explore this enigmatic drink and how its possible chemical properties served as the final powerful catalyst, forcing the initiate's ego to momentarily dissolve and allowing the pneuma to merge with the boundless reality of the collective unconscious, preparing them for the ultimate vision. The 9-day ritual of the Eleusinian Mysteries was a masterpiece of psychological engineering. Block 2 detailed the mythological preparation, the living drama of Demeter and Persephone that prepared the initiate's subconscious mind by engaging the powerful archetypes of loss, descent, and retrieval. The days of fasting, ascesis, the ritual cleansing, the long chaotic walk to Eleusis, all served to strip the initiate's ego of its normal defenses, making the soul receptive. But preparation alone is rarely enough for fundamental transformation. A catalyst is required. This catalyst, the chemical key to the kingdom of the unconscious, was the sacred potion known as Kykeon. The Kykeon was the climax of the ritual sequence, the final required act before the descent into the telesterion, the great hall of initiation. Based on available historical fragments, the ingredients seemed deceptively simple: barley, mint, and water. The initiates, after days of rigorous fasting, were finally permitted to break their fast with this simple, humble brew. The very act of drinking it was profound, known as the mystic fast breaking. Why was this simple drink so central that it was consumed moments before the profound, secret vision? And why, if it was just barley water, was its consumption guarded with such severe ritual strictness? The answer lies in the deep, controversial, and essential scholarly hypothesis that the Kykeon contained a powerful psychoactive compound which served as the chemical mechanism for ego dissolution, a necessary precursor for accessing the depths of the collective unconscious that Carl Jung defined. Scholarly research suggests that the barley used in the Kykeon was likely infected, either intentionally or accidentally, with a fungus known as ergot, Claviceps purpurea. Ergot is a parasitic fungus that grows on the heads of grain, particularly rye and barley, and it contains ergoline alkaloids, the chemical precursors to the modern synthetic psychedelic compound LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide. To the Eleusinian priests, this would not have been a mere recreational drug. It would have been a sacred entheogen, a substance used to generate a direct experience of the divine. And from a Jungian perspective, the function of such a substance is absolutely critical to the success of the 9-day transformation. Jung and ego. Dissolution, the chemical shortcut. Carl Jung spent his professional life charting the perilous terrain of the unconscious mind. He understood that the greatest obstacle to individuation is the ego, the conscious self. The ego, by its nature, is a filter. It resists anything that threatens its sense of control, stability, and separateness. The ego is the guard at the gate of the self. The entire Eleusinian ritual was designed to bypass or shatter this guard. The fasting starved the ego of physical comfort. The mythological drama distracted the ego with symbolic trauma. The Kykeon delivered the final, non-negotiable blow: ego dissolution. When a powerful psychoactive compound takes effect, the boundaries between the subjective self, the ego, and the objective external reality dissolve. This is not hallucination. It is, in the Jungian sense, the shattering of the ego barrier that allows the contents of the deeper mind to flood the consciousness. Jung theorized that the collective unconscious, the vast impersonal reservoir of ancestral human experience, containing all the archetypes and wisdom of the species, is universally shared. But it is normally kept separate from the ego by powerful psychic barriers. The Kykeon, as a chemical key, provided the rapid, reliable pathway to unlock this reservoir. The initiate, physically weakened by days of ascesis and psychologically primed by the descent into the Hades archetype, would suddenly be confronted with the terrifying and glorious reality of the collective unconscious. The archetypes that were previously abstract concepts, the Great Mother, the Shadow, the Anima, would become living, undeniable realities. This experience achieves in hours what might take years of dream analysis and active imagination in Jungian therapy. It guarantees the core experience of unio mystica, the mystical union where the personal unconscious is temporarily merged with the universal psyche. The fear of death, which the mysteries famously cured, is primarily an ego fear. The ego, which defines itself by its boundary and separateness, sees death as its absolute cessation. If the ego can be temporarily and safely dissolved, the initiate experiences the profound truth that consciousness is not dependent on the limited ego. By accessing the collective unconscious through the Kykeon, the initiate realizes 1. Impermanence of the ego. The I is temporary and illusory. 2. Continuity of the self. The deeper self is connected to the eternal archetypal flow of the species. 3. Nature of the pleroma. In the dissolution, they experience the boundless fullness that exists beyond the restrictive material world, a profound insight shared with the Gnostics. Once you have experienced the absolute survival of consciousness beyond the ego, the fear of physical death, the ultimate ego threat, is rendered moot. You know fundamentally that you are part of an eternal flow. This knowledge, gained not through faith but through direct experience, is irreversible. The initiates did not consume the Kykeon alone. They consumed it together in the absolute darkness of the telesterion, the massive hall designed to hold thousands. Jung placed immense importance on the archetype of the group and the psychic power of collective ritual. When thousands of individuals simultaneously under the influence of an entheogen have their ego defenses shattered while focusing on the same archetypal drama, the resulting experience is amplified exponentially. The collective unconscious is not only accessed individually, it is collectively experienced and verified. The initiate's personal vision was instantly validated by the shared reality of the thousands around them. This ensured that the transformation was not dismissed by the ego as a mere hallucination upon returning to normal consciousness. It was a socially and spiritually confirmed reality. The Kykeon, therefore, was the final, elegant solution to the problem of rapid spiritual growth. It was the technology that translated the theoretical psychological map, the myth, into an undeniable, lived, psychochemical reality. But the Kykeon was only the mechanism. The goal was the Epopteia, the vision itself. The drug merely opened the door. The vision was what they saw on the other side. This final vision, which remains the greatest secret of the ancient world, was the moment the initiate finally confronted the fully integrated self. In our next block, we will use Jung's final theories on the self and synchronicity to reconstruct the final, unspeakable revelation of the Eleusinian Mysteries and explain how this vision provided the better hope that cured their fear of death. The entire 9-day journey, the ritual preparation, the mythological psychodrama, the descent into the archetype of the shadow, and the consumption of the powerful Kykeon was all preparation for one single blinding moment. The Epopteia, Epopteia. This Greek term translates literally to seeing over or oversight, signifying the ultimate vision, the final supreme revelation of the mysteries. This vision was the secret guarded by the penalty of death for 2 millennia. We have no written record of what transpired, only the testimony of those who experienced it. They were forever cured of the fear of death. The knowledge they gained was not theoretical or philosophical. It was a profound, lived certainty of the soul's continuity. To truly understand the Epopteia, we must turn to the final, most complex phase of Carl Jung's analytical psychology, the realization of the self and the experience of synchronicity. In Jungian terms, the self is the totality of the psyche, the conscious integrated with the unconscious. It is the central organizing archetype of the personality, the internal guiding mechanism that seeks wholeness. Wholeness. The entire process of individuation leads to a realization of the self. The Epopteia was the direct, non-rational experience of this self. After the ego was dissolved by the Kykeon and the psyche primed by the Persephone myth, the descent into the unconscious, the initiate, sitting in the darkness of the telesterion, would witness the mandala of the self, the ultimate pattern of psychic completeness. Scholars, drawing on cryptic artistic and literary clues, believe the vision may have involved the simple yet profound presentation of an ear of grain cut in silence, a silent revealing. This simple symbol presented at the climax of the ritual is deeply significant. 1. The ear of grain, the cycle of life. The seed, the pneuma or soul, must be buried, death the underworld, in order to produce the stalk, life the self, which bears the fruit, renewal. This simple botanical cycle illustrates the psychological proof of resurrection. The initiate realized that death is not cessation but a necessary descent and rebirth. Just like the grain, they were not merely told they would survive death. They saw the eternal law of the psyche that guarantees their own cyclical return. 2. Cut in silence. This emphasized that the supreme truth is beyond language, nonverbal. The gnosis gained was an immediate, non-rational certainty, a profound inner knowing that words could only dilute. It bypassed the intellect, the ego's domain, and spoke directly to the soul, the domain of the self. This realization of the self is what banished the fear of death. The initiate realized their individual identity was merely a transient wave in a boundless ocean, the collective unconscious. The ocean remains, even when the wave dissipates. The Epopteia gave them psychological proof that they were the ocean. The final layer of the Epopteia, essential for its profound effect, lies in Jung's concept of synchronicity. Jung defined synchronicity as a meaningful coincidence and a causal connecting principle between the inner world, the psyche, and the external world, matter. When the initiates experienced the Epopteia under the influence of the Kykeon, their psychic barriers were down. They were experiencing reality not through the ego, but through the integrated self. In this state of wholeness, the boundaries between subject and object, self and cosmos, disappear. The vision of the ear of grain, the return of Persephone, the triumph of life over death. These were not simply images. They were synchronistic moments where the personal psychological need of the initiate for meaning was answered by the objective truth of the cosmos. The inner transformation aligned perfectly with an external universal law. This realization is the true secret of the Epopteia. The initiated understood that the universe is not random, but deeply meaningful. The cosmos is organized not by blind chance, but by archetypal patterns that resonate with the human soul. This sense of being integrated into a meaningful, eternal cosmic order is the only thing that can truly eliminate the existential dread of modern life. The entire ritual was designed to manufacture synchronicity, to force a meaningful encounter between the psyche and the cosmos, thereby providing absolute certainty that the soul is protected, purposeful, and permanent. When the mysteries were finally suppressed by the Roman Empire in 392 AD, the world lost the technology of psychological integration. Christianity inherited the myth of death and resurrection but removed the experiential component. The Epopteia was replaced by faith, a belief in a promise rather than a direct, verifiable experience of the self. The path became one of obedience to an external authority rather than reliance on internal personal gnosis, knowledge. The subsequent psychological fragmentation of Western civilization, our crippling anxiety, our spiritual nihilism, our dependence on external sources for validation, is the direct result of losing the Epopteia. We have the mythological narrative, the Bible, the classics, but we lack the sacred technology, the Kykeon, and the ritual framework that allows the ego to dissolve and the self to realize its eternal nature. Carl Jung dedicated his life to rebuilding this bridge, using the tools of modern psychology to reconstruct the path of the ancient initiates. He sought to bring the profound, transformative power of the Epopteia back into the experience of modern humanity. In our final block, we will explore the practical applications of this knowledge. We will show you how Jung's life work, particularly the wisdom contained in his Red Book, provides the exact modern steps you can take today to initiate your own personal Epopteia and reclaim the ancient self-sovereign path to wholeness. The profound revelation of the Epopteia, the vision of the eternal self that cured the fear of death, was suppressed for over 1,500 years. The sacred technology of rapid psychological integration was lost, replaced by doctrines of sin, faith, and institutional obedience. The result was a fragmented, anxious world, entirely divorced from the wisdom of its own collective unconscious. But the Gnosis, the true knowledge, is never fully destroyed. Carl Gustav Jung was arguably the modern world's most successful reconstructor of this lost technology. He recognized the symbols, the archetypes, and the process of descent into the underworld that the Eleusinian initiates undertook. His life's work, culminating in the terrifying and brilliant odyssey documented in his Red Book, was his own attempt to undergo the Epopteia, his personal modern version of the 9-day ritual. Jung understood that we cannot consume the Kykeon or gather in the telesterion today. Therefore, the process of individuation, the path to realizing the self, must be undertaken internally, privately, and consistently. The Eleusinian Mysteries, viewed through the lens of Jungian psychology, offer a precise roadmap for your own spiritual journey. The first stage of Eleusinian transformation was the terrifying descent of Persephone, the confrontation with Hades, the ruler of the underworld. For you, the modern seeker, this is the imperative to confront your shadow. Your shadow is the Hades within you. All the qualities, emotions, and thoughts your ego has repressed because they were deemed unacceptable, dangerous, or shameful by society. It holds your darkest fears, your untapped rage, and your immense unactualized potential. The Jungian practice. Engage in shadow work. This begins with recognizing and taking ownership of the emotional projections you cast onto others. When you intensely dislike a trait in someone else, it is highly likely that trait is an unintegrated aspect of your own shadow. True initiation begins when you stop blaming the external world for your internal darkness and choose instead to integrate the entirety of who you are, light and shadow. The goal is not to destroy the shadow, but to make it a sovereign part of your whole self, just as Persephone became queen of the dead. Demeter's desperate wandering search for Persephone symbolizes the conscious ego's tireless quest to find the lost wisdom of the soul. Jung taught that the most direct way the unconscious attempts to communicate with the ego is through dreams. The priests of Eleusis did not rely on doctrine. They relied on direct experience. Your dreams are your direct experience of the collective unconscious, free from the censorship of the waking ego. The Jungian practice. Practice active dream analysis. Do not merely remember your dreams, engage with them. Record them meticulously. Look for recurring symbols, archetypal figures, and emotional patterns. Your dreams are the secret instructions from the self, guiding you on your path of individuation, correcting the imbalances imposed by the archons of the modern world. The more you listen to your dreams, the more you align your conscious life with the deeper wisdom of your unconscious destiny. The Kykeon served to dissolve the ego and force the visionary experience of the Epopteia. Since we cannot rely on entheogens, Jung developed a powerful, disciplined technique for accessing the collective unconscious. Active imagination. This is the modern spiritual technology for self-initiation. Kykeon, the Jungian practice. In a relaxed meditative state, deliberately visualize a symbolic scene from your dream or a key myth, like Persephone's descent. Then you allow the characters in that scene, the archetypes, to speak and move independently of your conscious will. You record the dialogue. This process forces a direct, non-rational confrontation with the archetypes, allowing the self to bypass the ego's filters and communicate directly. Active imagination is the intentional, controlled creation of a meaningful coincidence, a synchronicity, within the safety of your own psyche. The wisdom of Eleusis, validated by the entire corpus of Jungian psychology, delivers one essential message to your modern life. Transformation is achieved not by looking outward, but by descending inward. The solution to the fear of death, anxiety, and meaninglessness is not found in external answers, but in the integration of the self. By undertaking this inner process, you are actively following the ancient map, creating your own personal Epopteia, and gaining the better hope that was once the exclusive privilege of the initiated few. The Gnosis of Eleusis is not lost. It is waiting to be realized within you. This journey through the Eleusinian Mysteries and the mind of Carl Jung reveals the oldest secret of personal liberation, that your wholeness is achieved through conscious, courageous self-encounter. The goal of this channel is to serve as your guide and community on this path of radical self-discovery. We are dedicated to recovering the lost technologies of the soul that institutional powers have sought to bury. If you are serious about moving beyond surface-level answers and engaging in the deep work of individuation, if you are ready to reclaim the wisdom of the ancients that Jung sought to restore, then you must make a conscious decision now. First, your intellectual commitment is crucial. The pursuit of the self requires continuous study and dedication. Subscribe to the Scrolls of Anubis and activate the bell. By doing so, you are actively declaring your commitment to the path of Gnosis and ensuring you receive the next vital piece of the ancient puzzle. Every new subscriber strengthens the collective purpose of this community. Second, your participation validates the path. The collective unconscious is strengthened when we share our realizations. We challenge you to use the comments below as your personal telesterion. Share your greatest insight gained from this analysis of Jung and Eleusis. Which archetype resonates most powerfully with your current struggle? By speaking your truth, you contribute to the collective awakening and integration of the Gnosis. Do not let this powerful information be a mere intellectual exercise. Let it be the first step in your personal initiation. Choose the path of the initiated. Choose the path of the self.